Emily never imagined a simple touch could change everything. When her hand brushed against the fingers of millionaire Richard Sterling during the gala event she was serving, a jolt of white light exploded in her mind. For 3 eternal seconds, she wasn't in the opulent Manhattan ballroom anymore. She stood before a gilded throne, wearing a sapphire crown, beside a king with piercing eyes, a king who was the spitting image of the man before her. The year was 1225, and they weren't employer and employee. They were king and queen of the kingdom of Eldoria, absolute rulers, eternal lovers, soulmates destined to find each other again, even if it took 1,000 lifetimes. Richard froze too. His eyes widened as he recognized not just her face, but her soul. The same woman he had seen in dreams since childhood, the queen who held his hand as their kingdom crumbled around them, the wife he vowed to protect until his very last breath. And now she was here, in a server's uniform, holding a silver tray, looking at him with the same terror and recognition he felt. Neither of them could speak. The ballroom continued around them, executives laughing, champagne flutes clinking. But for Richard and Emily, time had stopped 800 years ago. Emily dropped the tray. The clatter of metal hitting the floor shattered the silence. All eyes turned to her. Her supervisor, Bob, stormed forward, furious. But Richard raised his hand, ordering him to stop. He couldn't tear his eyes away from her. Those deep brown eyes he saw every night before falling asleep. The same expression of courage and tenderness. The same tiny scar above her left eyebrow that Queen Isabella had, the result of a childhood fall in the royal gardens. How was it possible? How could a scar from 8 centuries ago be etched onto the skin of a 21st century woman? If you're feeling chills right now, hit that like button immediately. This story goes beyond anything you've ever heard. And if you believe that souls truly reunite across time, write King and Queen in the comments below. Let's see how many of you recognize the power of eternal love. Ring that notification bell because you need to know what happened when Richard discovered the object that proves everything. Emily fled to the employee restroom. Her hands trembled so violently she could barely turn on the faucet. Cold water splashed on her face. Breathe. Just breathe. But the images wouldn't stop. She saw the grand hall of Eldoria's castle, the crimson and gold banners, the throne where she sat every morning beside her husband, King Edward. No, not Edward. Richard. They were the same person, the same soul, the same stormy grey eyes that gazed at her with absolute devotion. How did she know this? How was it possible to remember a life she never lived? The restroom door creaked open. Emily turned, expecting Bob to fire her, but it was Richard. Alone. He locked the door behind him, completely inappropriate, but neither of them cared about protocols at that moment. He stared at her as if he were seeing a ghost or a miracle, maybe both. "You saw it too," Richard said, not as a question, but as a statement. His voice was hoarse, laden with an emotion he never allowed himself to show in public. "You saw the castle, the throne. You saw us." Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I saw you die," she whispered. "The battle, the swords. You protected me until the end. You fell in my arms and made me swear I wouldn't give up the kingdom, that I would rule alone. But I couldn't. 3 months later, I followed you." Richard closed his eyes, the memory hitting him like a blade. He remembered the pain, the blood, her face, beautiful and devastated, being the last thing he saw before darkness, and the promise he made as his life slipped away. "I will find you again, no matter how long it takes, no matter what form I return in. My soul will recognize yours." "And here we are," Emily murmured, the irony bitter in her voice. "You came back as a king again, a billionaire, powerful, commanding empires, and I came back as your server." Richard took a step forward, raising his hand slowly. "May I?" Emily hesitated, then nodded. When his fingers touched her face, the vision returned, stronger this time. They saw their royal wedding day, the crowd celebrating in the streets of Eldoria, the crown being placed on her head by the Archbishop, the kiss that sealed not just a political alliance, but a love that would transcend centuries. When the vision dissipated, Richard was cupping her face in both hands, forehead pressed to hers, breathing as if he'd run miles. "I don't care what you are in this life," he said with fierce intensity. "You are my queen, always have been, always will be." Emily wanted to believe it. Every fiber of her being screamed that it was true. But reality was cruel. They weren't in 1225. They were in 2025, and she was an undocumented immigrant from Ecuador, working 3 jobs to send money to her sick mother. And he was Richard Sterling, heir to an $8 billion fortune, expected to marry some European socialite his family had already chosen. "This is impossible," she whispered, pulling away. "You know it is." Richard was about to respond when violent knocks on the door interrupted them. Bob's voice from the other side, threatening to call security. Richard opened the door with an icy expression that made the supervisor recoil. "Emily is dismissed for the rest of the evening," he declared in a tone that brooked no argument, "with full pay, and I want to see her in my office tomorrow, 15th floor, 9 a.m. Bob tried to protest, but Richard had already left, leaving Emily trembling, trying to understand if any of that had really happened or if she was losing her mind. That night, neither of them slept. Richard was in his $60 million penthouse, surrounded by luxury that meant nothing, staring at the only thing that had ever truly intrigued him. An ancient painting he bought at auction 5 years ago for reasons he never fully understood. It cost $3 million. His consultant said it was insane to pay so much for a work by an unknown 13th century artist, but Richard couldn't resist, because the painting showed a king and queen of Eldoria, and the king had his face. And the queen was Emily. He always thought it was just a strange resemblance, a coincidence. But now, looking at the discreet plaque in the lower corner, he read what he'd previously ignored. King Edward and Queen Isabella of Eldoria, 1225, died in the same spring 3 months apart. It is said she died of a broken heart after losing him at the Battle of Montclair. Richard touched the painted face of the Queen. Isabella, Emily, the same soul. In bodies separated by 800 years. It was real, impossible, but real. Meanwhile, in the tiny apartment Emily shared with 3 other women in Queens, she was sitting on the floor of the shared bathroom, the only privacy she had, holding something she'd kept since she was a child, a ring, simple, worn gold, with a crest she'd never identified. Her grandmother gave it to her before she died, saying it had been in the family for countless generations, that it belonged to a queen a long time ago, that it would be hers when she found her true match. Emily always thought it was just a fanciful story, an old wives' tale. But now, looking at the crest, she recognized it. It was the symbol of Eldoria, the lion and the rose intertwined. The same symbol she saw in the vision, engraved on his throne, embroidered on their royal robes. This ring wasn't just any heirloom, it was proof. If your heart is racing, share this video right now. The story is just beginning, and you won't believe the next piece of evidence that appeared. And if you want more true stories of reincarnation and soulmates that will change your perception of reality, subscribe to the channel and activate all notifications. The next morning, Emily almost didn't go. What was the point? Even if it was all true, even if they really were king and queen in another life, it didn't change the brutal reality of now. She was undocumented in the United States. He was one of the wealthiest men in the Western Hemisphere. Fairy tales didn't happen to people like her, but something stronger than logic pulled her. At 9 o'clock sharp, she was in the lobby of Sterling Tower, the glass skyscraper that Richard owned outright. The receptionist looked at her maid's uniform with disdain, but when Emily gave her name, the expression changed to shock. Mr. Sterling is expecting you. 15th floor, use the private elevator. The elevator was entirely mirrored. Emily saw her reflection and wanted to cry. Hair pulled back in a simple bun, no makeup. The same black pants and white blouse she wore for work. Next to her, a stunning woman in a Chanel suit entered, talking on the phone in French about a charity gala. She was the kind of woman who belonged in Richard's world. Emily was just a shadow. But when the doors opened on the 15th floor, Richard was waiting personally. He dismissed his secretary, extended his hand to Emily with a reverence that made the Frenchwoman stare in shock before the doors closed. His office was bigger than the entire apartment where Emily lived. Floor-to-ceiling glass, a view of all of Manhattan, art that was worth more than she'd earn in 10 lifetimes. And right in the center, behind the mahogany desk, the painting of them. Emily stopped, hand to her mouth, eyes filling with tears. Richard observed her reaction, confirmation that he wasn't crazy. I bought it 5 years ago, he explained. I never knew why. Now I know. I was waiting for you to recognize it. She approached slowly, touching the gilded frame. The painter captured everything, the way Richard, looked at Isabella as if she were the sun around which his world revolved, the way her hand rested on his on the arm of the throne. A simple but absolute connection. The love was so obvious, it transcended centuries. I brought something too, Emily said softly, taking the ring from her pocket. Richard took it, turning it to the light. When he held it next to the crest painted on the king's clothing in the painting, it was a perfect match. My God, he breathed, you've kept this for 800 years. My family kept it, she corrected, passing it from mother to daughter, waiting. My grandmother said I'd know when I found the right person. She was right. Richard closed his hand around the ring, then around Emily's hand. Immediately, the vision returned. But this time it wasn't battle or death. It was a quiet moment. They were in the royal chamber, late at night, just the two of them. Isabella, 6 months pregnant with their first child, Edward kneeling, head resting on her belly, whispering promises to the baby that would never be born because the battle would come first. When they returned to the present, both were crying. We would have had a child, Emily whispered. I was pregnant when you died. I lost the baby 2 weeks later, from heartbreak, from trauma. The pain in Richard's chest was physical. He pulled Emily into his arms, holding her as if he could protect her retroactively from all the suffering she'd endured. Never again, he swore against her hair. In this life, I won't fail you, I won't die, I won't leave you. We're going to have everything that was stolen from us. But how? Emily asked, the practical question cutting through the emotion. Richard, you have a life, a fiancé chosen by your family, companies to run. I'm a nobody. I shouldn't even be in this country. He pulled away, holding her face, forcing her to look him in the eyes. You are a queen, he said with absolute certainty. My queen, and kings don't ask permission. They do what's right. Before Emily could answer, the office door swung open abruptly. A woman entered, stunning in a red Valentino dress, diamonds on her neck that cost more than houses. She stopped when she saw Richard holding Emily, disgust crossing her perfect face. Am I interrupting something? Her voice dripped sweet venom. Richard, darling, our lunch with your parents is in 20 minutes. I hope your maid will be finished soon. This is Gabriella Sandoval, Richard said, his voice controlled but tense. The woman my parents want me to marry. Gabriella, this is Emily, the woman I'm going to marry. For real. The silence that followed was atomic. Gabriella looked between them, incredulous, then began to laugh, hysterical, cutting. You're joking. You're going to destroy the Sandoval-Montenegro merger, disobey your parents, ruin decades of alliances. For a maid, without hesitation, Richard answered, yes. This is the moment that separates those who believe in true love from those who don't. If you're on Richard's side, write eternal love in the comments. If you think he's crazy, write reality. I want to see where you stand. And if this story is moving you, consider giving a super thanks. It helps bring more impossible stories that are real. Gabriella slammed the door so hard the window shook. Emily was pale. Richard, you can't do this. You don't know me. Not really. Outside of visions and past lives, we're strangers. Then let's change that, Richard said simply. How much time do you need? A month? 6 months? A year? Take a leave from work. With pay? Stay here. Get to know who I am now. Let me get to know who you are. And then decide. Why, and if we discover we're not compatible in this life? Were those memories real, but does that mean we should be together now? Then I'll accept it, Richard promised. But Emily, I've dreamt of you every night since I was 6 years old. I sketched your face before I knew how to draw properly. I bought that painting because something in me recognized you. Souls don't lie, and mine is screaming that you're my destiny. Emily wanted to argue, but she couldn't. Because she had dreams too. Always dreamt of a man with grey eyes, saving her, loving her, dying for her. She'd wake up crying for someone she thought was imaginary. Until yesterday. Okay, she whispered. 1 month. But no $60 million penthouse, no jewelry. I need to know who you are as a person, not as a billionaire. Deal, Richard smiled. Genuine and devastating. Then we start with coffee. Do you like coffee? In the next 2 years, because 1 month became 6, and 6 became forever. Richard and Emily built something that transcended past lives. Yes, they had the connection from 800 years ago. Yes, every touch brought flashes of Eldoria, of ancient love, of eternal promises. But they also had new memories. Richard teaching Emily to ice skate at Rockefeller Center, both falling and laughing until it hurt. Emily making Ecuadorian empanadas in his penthouse kitchen. Richard tasting them and declaring them better than any Michelin star restaurant. They argued about politics, philosophy, silly movies, discovering that Edward and Isabella were compatible, but Richard and Emily were perfect. Still, the world didn't make it easy. Richard's parents tried to cut him off from the inheritance. The press was brutal, calling Emily a gold digger, questioning her immigration status, inventing scandals. Richard hired the best lawyers to legalize her status, but the process was slow, and Gabriella didn't give up, showing up at events, whispering poison in the ears of high society. The breaking point came at a gala event. Richard had to attend. Family event, impossible to avoid. Emily went as his date, wearing a simple but elegant dress that Richard bought. She felt out of place among million-dollar diamonds, conversations about yachts, and summer homes in Capri. Gabriella approached when Richard was temporarily occupied with an investor. She offered Emily champagne with a shark-like smile. "Do you really think this will last?" she asked softly. Richard might be amused now, playing fairy tale, but men like him always return to their own kind. When he tires of you, and he will tire, where will you be? No job, no life of your own, just ashes of a dream. Before Emily could respond, an elderly voice interrupted, a female voice, laden with authority. "I wouldn't be so sure, dear Gabriella." Both turned. A silver-haired lady, vintage Dior dress, understated but clearly antique jewelry, watched with sharp eyes. Emily didn't recognize her, but Gabriella paled. "Mrs. Sterling," she greeted, bowing slightly, Richard's grandmother, the matriarch of the family, the woman who built half of the Sterling Empire alongside her late husband. And she was looking at Emily with an unreadable expression. "You're the young woman my grandson has turned the world upside down for," she stated. "Emily Rivera, correct?" "Yes, ma'am," Emily responded, lifting her chin despite the fear. "I'm sorry if I've caused your family trouble." "Trouble," Mrs. Sterling repeated and then smiled. "Child, you have no idea. Come with me. We need to talk." She guided Emily to a private room. closed the door. From a tiny purse, she pulled out something that made Emily's heart stop. A locket, ancient, worn gold, with the same crest as her ring, the lion and the rose of Eldoria. "This has been in my family for 300 years, Mrs. Sterling explained, passed down from grandmother to granddaughter, along with a story I always thought was a legend. The story said that our ancestors were kings, that the kingdom fell, the lineage scattered, but the blood continued, that one day, when the last descendant of the king met the last descendant of the queen, the circle would close." Emily touched the locket with a trembling hand. "Do you believe it?" "I didn't," Mrs. Sterling admitted, "until I saw you, until I saw how Richard looks at you, exactly how my late husband looked at me. That look that says you're the air he breathes. And then I did some research about Eldoria, about King Edward and Queen Isabella, and I discovered something fascinating." She pulled folded papers from her bag, ancient documents, copies of historical records. When Eldoria fell, 6 months after Queen Isabella's death, the few survivors of the royal family fled. King Edward's younger brother went to what is now Spain, my line. Queen Isabella's younger sister went to Ecuador with missionaries. Your line, I presume. My grandmother always said we had noble blood, Emily whispered, tears streaming. I never believed it. Believe it, Mrs. Sterling said firmly. But more importantly, believe this. My grandson is a stubborn, proud, controlling man, but he's also more loyal than anyone I've ever met. If he's chosen you, it's forever. And if you're truly the reincarnation of Queen Isabella, then welcome back to the family. You never should have left. She placed the locket on Emily's neck with gentle hands. Wear this at your wedding. Match it with your ring. And tell my grandson he has my blessing. His parents will adjust, or they'll be left out. But you have my support. Now go. He's looking for you, and when Richard goes into protective mode, a gala event becomes a war zone. When Emily returned to the ballroom, Richard was effectively arguing with security about entering the private area. He saw her, the relief visible, and crossed the room in 6 long strides. Are you okay? What did my grandmother say? If she was cruel, I swear I'll... She gave her blessing, Emily interrupted, showing the locket. And proof that maybe we're not as impossible as we thought. That night, Richard proposed to Emily, not with a $1 million ring, but with her ring, the ring of Queen Isabella, which he had cleaned and adjusted perfectly. He knelt in her simple apartment in Queens, not in his penthouse, because he said he wanted to propose where she felt at home. I can't promise it will be easy, he said, holding her hand. The press will be horrible. Half my family will fight it. They'll say terrible things about you, but I promise that every day I will choose you, as Edward chose Isabella, as Richard chooses Emily, because you're not just the love of one life. You're the love of all lives. Emily pulled him up, kissed him with everything she had. As they parted ways, she whispered, Edward died protecting me. Richard is living loving me. I think I prefer this version. The wedding took place 6 months later. Not the extravagance Richard's family expected, but a beautiful ceremony in a historic garden that, research revealed, was a gift from King Edward and Queen Isabella to the city of Eldoria 800 years ago. Now it was a public park in a small Spanish village. Emily wore a simple lace dress, Richard's grandmother's medallion, and her ring. Richard wore a classic suit with the sterling crest, which was the Eldoria crest, on his pocket. As they exchanged vows, they both had the same vision, King Edward and Queen Isabella, on their wedding day, making identical promises. And then something new, a vision of the future, a little girl with brown eyes and dark hair, laughing as Richard spun her in the air, a boy with intense grey eyes, serious like his father, holding Emily's hand. The family they didn't have in 1225. The family they would have now. If you're feeling emotional, If you believe that this love was destiny, hit that notification bell and subscribe now, because the story has one last twist that no one expected. And you need to give a super thanks if impossible love stories that become real touch your heart. Their honeymoon was in Eldoria, or what was left of it. The kingdom no longer existed, absorbed by modern countries over the centuries. But the castle was still there, dramatic ruins on top of a hill, open to tourists. Richard rented the entire thing for a week. Walking through the corridors where they ruled 800 years ago was surreal. Every stone brought memories. The grand hall where they received ambassadors, the gardens where Edward proposed to Isabella, both 16 years old, a young but absolute love. The tower where Isabella spent 3 months after his death, withering away, unable to continue without her other half. On their last night, they climbed to what remained of the throne room. The full moon illuminated the broken stones, and there, in the exact place where the throne stood, they saw, not a vision this time, reality. 2 translucent figures, glowing softly. King Edward and Queen Isabella, young, beautiful, wearing royal clothes, looking at Richard and Emily with smiles of complete peace. Edward spoke, his voice echoing as if from far away. "You fulfilled the promise. You found each other. You loved again. The circle is complete." Isabella added, extending a hand they couldn't touch. "Live the life we couldn't. Have the children we lost. Be happy for both couples. And when it's time, we'll be waiting. But don't rush. Enjoy every moment." The figures dissipated in the moonlight, leaving only a feeling of blessing. Emily cried, but they were happy tears. Richard held her, kissing the top of her head. They had their ending. Now it's our turn to live. 3 years later, Emily Sterling, no longer Rivera, was sitting in the office that Richard had created for her in Sterling Tower. She now ran the family foundation, focused on helping immigrants like she was, giving opportunities, legalizing situations, building bridges. Richard was beside her, not above, true partners, king and queen of a modern empire, built on love, not conquest. The door opened, and a 4-year-old girl came running in. "Mommy, Daddy, look what Grandma gave me." She showed an old history book about Eldoria. Richard picked up his daughter, looked at the book. His mother had finally accepted it completely, fascinated by the reincarnation story, diving into historical research. The book was about the kings of Eldoria throughout the ages, and it had a whole chapter about King Edward and Queen Isabella, the royal couple who loved so deeply that legend said they would return. "That's us," little Sophia said with a child's certainty. "You and Mommy. The teacher read it at school, and I knew it." Emily and Richard exchanged a glance. They had never told her, but of course she knew. Souls recognized truth. "Yes, my love," Emily said, pulling her daughter into her lap. "That's us, and you're the princess we never got to have before." Their son, 2-year-old Michael, came toddling in behind his sister, holding a toy sword. "I'm a prince," he declared. Richard laughed, a rich, happy sound that Emily never tired of hearing. "Yes, you are, prince of our kingdom, which has no borders or walls, only love." That night, when the children were asleep, Richard and Emily stood on the penthouse balcony, looking at the lights of Manhattan. "Do you regret it?" Richard asked softly. "The battles with the press, with my family, with everyone who said it wouldn't work." Emily turned, in touching his face, initiating the vision purposefully now. They had learned to control it, see when they wanted. They relived their first touch, the explosion of recognition, then all the moments since then, the proposal, the wedding, the birth of Sophia, the birth of Michael, memories of 2 lives, intertwined perfectly. When the vision ended, Emily replied, "I don't regret a single second. In 1225, we had love but no time. In 2025, we have both, and I would choose to fight for you in every life, Richard kissed her long and deep, then rested his forehead against hers. When we die this time, it will be old, together, surrounded by grandchildren. No battles, no tragedy. And if there's a next life, I'll find you again. But I'm going to enjoy this one first. Agreed, Emily whispered. King and queen, forever and somewhere, in the ruins of the Eldoria castle. If you listen closely, you can still hear echoes of laughter. King Edward and Queen Isabella, finally at peace, watching their future selves be happy. The love that transcended 800 years. The promise that never broke. The souls that always find each other. This is the end of the story. Or maybe it's just the beginning, because true love doesn't end. It only transforms. And if you believe that, if you feel that in the depths of your soul, leave a like. Share it with someone who needs to believe in impossible love. And subscribe, because there are more stories waiting. Stories of ordinary people who discovered they were extraordinary. Of connections that defy logic. Of destiny that doesn't take no for an answer. And who knows, maybe you also have a soul waiting to find you again. Pay attention to the next touch that makes your heart stop. It might not be an accident. It might be recognition from 800 years of waiting. Thank you for watching. Thank you for believing. And remember, eternal love is not a fantasy. It's a promise that some souls make and always keep until the next impossible story that's real. But the story of Richard and Emily doesn't end here, because the true power of soulmates isn't just in finding each other, but in creating something bigger than themselves. And what they created would change not only their lives, but hundreds of thousands of others. 5 years after the wedding, the Eldoria Foundation, spearheaded by Emily, with Richard's total investment, had assisted over 50,000 immigrants in securing their legal status, obtaining dignified employment, and reuniting families torn apart by cruel borders. Emily worked 16-hour days because she knew exactly what it was like to be invisible, to be disposable, to be judged by paperwork instead of humanity. Richard, in turn, completely overhauled the Sterling Empire. He sold off questionable businesses, invested heavily in clean energy, affordable housing, and education. His profits plummeted by 40%. His former associates called him crazy, but he slept better than he ever had in his entire life, because wealth without purpose was a gilded cage, and he had been freed by a woman who served him dinner and touched his hand. Still, there was something that haunted them, the vision of the son they lost in 1225, the baby Isabella carried when Edward died, the child who was never born because heartbreak killed mother and child together. Yes, they had Sophia and Miguel now, but that soul, that firstborn, where was it? The answer came in the most unexpected way. One day, Emily was visiting a shelter for orphaned children that the foundation supported. She was walking through the yard when she saw a boy sitting alone under a tree. He was maybe 7 years old. Messy, dark hair, eyes that were a strange mixture of brown and gray. And when he looked up and saw Emily, something flickered across his face. Recognition. Emily froze. Those eyes. She knew those eyes. Not from this life. From another. "Who is he?" she asked the shelter director, her voice coming out hoarse. "Sebastian," the director replied sadly. "Abandoned at 3 years old, never been adopted. People say he's strange, that he talks about past lives, about being the son of kings. Obviously, trauma from abandonment, manifesting in fantasy." Emily approached slowly. The boy watched her without fear, only intense curiosity. She knelt in front of him, and when their eyes met, she knew this was the son of Edward and Isabella, who was never born in 1225. The soul that had waited 800 years to finally arrive in their family. "You know me," Sebastian said. "It wasn't a question. You're my mother. Not from this time. From before." Tears streamed down Emily's face. "Yes," she whispered. From before, and now again, if you want. 4 months later, after an adoption process that Richard expedited with the best lawyers, but following every rule to the letter, Sebastian Sterling came home. Sophia and Miguel accepted him instantly, as if they had always known there was a brother missing. And that first night, when the whole family was gathered together, Richard held Emily close and looked at his 3 children playing together. Complete, he murmured. Finally, complete. But Sebastian brought more than just completing the family. He brought memories that neither Richard nor Emily had. Memories from his point of view as an unborn baby. He described the royal chamber where Isabella spent her final months, details that no painting or historical document recorded. He drew crests that archaeologists only discovered 3 years later, excavating the ruins of Eldoria. He was living proof that this was all real. Scientists wanted to study him. Universities offered fortunes for access. But Richard and Emily refused everything. Sebastian wasn't an experiment. He was their son. And if the world didn't believe, that was the world's problem. As the years passed, the children grew up knowing their full story, that their parents were old souls who had found each other again, that they themselves were part of a journey that began centuries ago. But Richard and Emily were careful. They made it clear that past lives were interesting, but this life, this family, these moments were what mattered. Sophia became a doctor, specializing in war traumas, saying that if Edward died in battle, she would save others who faced the same. Miguel became an architect, restoring ancient castles, preserving history, and Sebastian, the son who waited the longest, became a writer, documenting stories of souls who reunite, giving hope to people who had lost someone they loved. Richard and Emily aged together, grey hair, wrinkles that mapped decades of laughter, and a few tears, but their love only deepened. Every anniversary, they returned to the ruins of Eldoria. They walked through the same corridors, touched the same stones, and with each year, they felt Edward and Isabella further away, because those souls had finally rested. They had passed the baton. On their 50th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even 2 great-grandchildren, Richard raised his glass in a toast. 50 years with the woman I've loved for 800, he said. His voice choked with emotion. In 1225, we had 2 years before the war tore us apart. In this life, we've had 73 years together and counting. I'd call that a victory. Emily took his hand. The touch that still, after all these decades, brought a small flash of memory. But now the memories were mostly from this life. The first house they bought together, Sophia's first word, the first time Sebastian called them Mom and Dad, Miguel's graduation, the weddings of their children, the birth of each grandchild. The old memories were the foundation, but the new ones were the house they built on top. When Richard passed away at 92, it was in peace, surrounded by family. Emily held his hand, exactly as Isabella held Edward's, but this time there was no despair, only gratitude. They had their time, all of it. Thank you for waiting for me, Richard whispered with his last breath. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for all the years. Emily kissed his forehead. Until next time, my king. But don't rush. I have grandchildren to meet first. She lived another 14 years, saw great-grandchildren become teenagers, saw the foundation she created impact 1 million lives, saw Sebastian publish a book that became an international bestseller, bringing the concept of soulmates and reincarnation to the mainstream. And when her time came, at 103 years old, lucid until the end, surrounded by 4 generations of descendants, her last words were simple. He's waiting. I can see him. My Edward, my Richard, waiting to dance again. She closed her eyes with a smile, and those who were present swore they saw 2 translucent figures beside the bed, a man extending his hand, a woman taking it, and then both disappearing together into the light at the funeral, held in the ruins of Eldoria as she requested. Something extraordinary happened as her ashes and Richard's were scattered together where the royal throne once stood. The sun broke through the storm clouds, a double ray of light descended, exactly where the ashes fell, and everyone present felt it. Peace, completion, the end of one journey, and the beginning of another. Bob, now a 68-year-old man, watched with tears streaming down his face. He would return to this place many times in the years that followed. He would write more books, but the last chapter of his most famous book would be about this moment. True love, he wrote, isn't about never separating. It's about always returning. My parents separated in 1225 and found each other in 2025, 800 years later. And when you love like that, so deeply that it transcends time, space, and death, 800 years is just a breath, a blink, a pause between chapters. They had 3 lives that I know of, Edward and Isabella, Richard and Emily, and now, wherever souls go, they have eternity, without interruptions, without battles, without separations. And if you're reading this, questioning if soulmates are real, if it's worth waiting, if true love exists, let me tell you, I am the proof. I am the son who waited 800 years to be born. And if my soul can wait that long, if my parents can find each other against all odds, then yes, eternal love is real and worth every second of waiting. If this story has touched you, share it now. Someone you know needs to know that love doesn't end, that souls find each other, that promises made with a true heart never break, no matter how long it takes to fulfill them. Subscribe because there are more stories waiting, more proof that this universe is more magical than we've been taught. And if you are waiting for someone, if you feel there's a soul somewhere that is yours, don't give up. They are looking for you, as much as you are looking for them. And when you meet, when your eyes meet, and you recognize beyond logic or reason, you will know 800 years of waiting will be over. Give us super thanks if you believe, if you feel the truth of this story in your heart. It keeps these stories alive, spreading hope in a world that often forgets that miracles happen. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing. Thank you for being part of this journey. Richard and Emily are together now. Edward and Isabella, finally at peace. And somewhere, maybe already planning their next life, because love like that doesn't stop. It just continues, forever, until we meet again, in another story, in another time. Because if souls can cross 800 years, we will certainly meet again here, with eternal love and infinite gratitude. This is the true story of 2 souls who never gave up, who always returned to each other, who proved that love, real and true and impossible, is the only thing in this universe that really lasts forever. 10 years after Emily's death, when the world had already transformed her and Richard's story into a modern legend, something extraordinary happened in a hospital in Buenos Aires. A young woman, 23 years old, gave birth, and when the nurse placed the baby in her arms, the mother felt something strange, as if she were handing the child over, not receiving it. The baby, a girl, opened her eyes. They were grey, not the common grey of newborns, but storm cloud grey, intense, knowledgeable, and when she looked at her mother, there wasn't the empty gaze of a newborn. There was recognition and something else, longing. The mother, startled, and called the doctor, but there was nothing wrong. The baby was perfectly healthy, just had strange eyes and a tiny birthmark above her left eyebrow, like an old scar. They named her Luna, and as she grew, strange things happened. At 2 years old, she drew castles she shouldn't know. At 4, she spoke about a king and queen who loved each other so much. They returned. At 6, she asked her parents to take her to a place called Eldoria. A place she had never heard of, but drew in perfect detail. The parents, worried, took her to psychologists. They all said the same thing: vivid imagination, creative fantasies, nothing concerning. But when Luna turned 8, she saw a piece on television about the death of Emily Sterling, about the legend of love that crossed 800 years. Luna stopped, frozen, looking at a photo of young Richard on the screen, and she began to cry. Not the cry of a scared child, the cry of an adult breaking. "I know him," she whispered. "I was him." Her parents tried to distract her, change the channel, but Luna was obsessed. She researched everything about Richard and Emily, about Edward and Isabella, and the more she read, the more she was absolutely certain. She was Edward, she was Richard. The soul had returned again, but this time alone. "Where is she?" Luna asked every night, looking at the stars. "Where is my queen? Why did I come back without her?" The answer would come years later. When Luna was 19, already a young woman, working in a small coffee shop in Buenos Aires to pay for history college, a customer came in. Young too, maybe 20 years old, dark hair, deep brown eyes, and a tiny birthmark above her left eyebrow. The two looked at each other, and the world stopped. The young woman dropped her bag. Luna dropped the cup she was holding. Glass shattered on the floor, but neither moved, because they were seeing the vision, the castle, the throne, the promise. "I am Isabella," the young woman whispered, tears already streaming. "I am Emily, and you are my king, my Richard, my Edward. You've returned." Luna rounded the counter, not caring about the customers staring in shock. She took the young woman's hands, and the explosion of light was so intense that others in the cafe swore later. They saw it, a golden glow enveloping the two for 3 seconds, then disappearing. "My name now is Eleanor," the young woman said, smiling through the tears, "and I've spent my whole life dreaming of you, of all your forms, king, billionaire, and now this, whoever you are this time." Luna, the ex-Richard, ex-Edward, held Eleanor's face, the ex-Emily, ex-Isabella, with absolute reverence. "This time," she whispered, "we are both women. This time, the world will judge us differently, but you are still my queen, and I am still your king. Souls have no gender, only love." Eleanor nodded, resting her forehead on Luna's. "Then let's do it again. Different lives, different bodies, same love, always the same love." And so it began again, not in the opulence of Stirling Tower, not in the castles of Eldoria, but in a tiny shared apartment, in common jobs, in struggles to pay bills, but with the same love. The love that crossed not just 800 years, but now 1,025. They married 5 years later, a small ceremony, just close friends, no press, no legend, just two souls who finally understood that it doesn't matter what form they return in, rich or poor, man or woman, powerful or ordinary. What matters is that they always come back. They always find each other. They always love each other. When they were 30, Luna and Elena traveled to Eldoria, to the ruins, and there, in the place where it all began, where everything always returns, they felt it, a presence. Not Edward and Isabella this time, but Richard and Emily, approving, blessing, definitely passing the torch. "You have learned," Richard's voice echoed, not with ears but with heart. "That love isn't about form, it's about essence. Live well, and when it's time to return again, we'll be cheering you on, always cheering you on." Luna and Elena lived to be 87 and 89 years old, respectively, without Richard Sterling's wealth, without the tragedy of Eldoria, just simple lives, filled with simple love, which was, after all, the most powerful form. And when they both passed away within months of each other, as they always did, they left letters. Letters that their nieces published. telling the whole story. All four incarnations that they knew, Edward and Isabella, Richard and Emily, Luna and Elena, and promising that there would be more, because souls like that don't stop. They just continue, spinning through time, finding each other in 1,000 different forms, proving that love, real love, knows no limits, not of time, not of space, not of body, not of circumstance, just love, eternal, infinite, inevitable. If you've read this far, if you've felt every word of this 1,000-year journey, you know it's true. You may not remember past lives, you may not have visions, but somewhere, deep in your soul, you recognize it. This kind of love exists, and maybe you've already had it, or you're looking for it, or you will find it. Hit that notification bell, subscribe, share this story with someone who needs to believe that love never dies, that it only transforms, that it always, always returns. Give us super thanks if this story changed something in you, if it planted hope, if it sparked a memory of something you didn't know you had. That keeps these stories alive, spreading light in a world that sometimes forgets that magic is real. Edward and Isabella began in 1225, Richard and Emily continued in 2025, Luna and Elena completed it in 2050, and somewhere now, in 2125, maybe 2 children are being born, one with grey eyes, another with a mark above her left eyebrow, and when they grow up, when they meet, it will all begin again, because that's what soulmates do. They return, they recognize, they love, through 1,000 lives, through 1,000 forms, through 1,000 worlds, and nothing, absolutely nothing in this universe can break that. Thank you for witnessing this journey. Thank you for believing. Thank you for carrying this truth in your heart until the next life, until the next encounter, until forever. With all the love that 1,000 years can contain, this is the story that never ends. Because true love never ends. It only grows, forever and ever and ever. In the year 2125, exactly 900 years after Edward and Isabella ruled Eldoria, an archaeological discovery shook the world. Excavating deep within what remained of the castle, researchers found a secret chamber, untouched for 9 centuries, and inside it, something impossible. 2 statues of white marble, perfect, intact, depicting a king and queen sitting on thrones side by side, hands intertwined, and on the base, an inscription in ancient Latin that, when translated, read, "Even when stone turns to dust, our love shall remain. Edward and Isabella, united beyond death. This promise we witness and seal with royal blood. May all who truly love find courage in our story." But what shocked scientists wasn't the inscription. It was the DNA preserved in tiny samples of blood, sealed in amber around the statues. Blood that analysis confirmed was 825 years old. The blood of King Edward and Queen Isabella. And when they compared that DNA with samples that Richard Sterling voluntarily gave for scientific study 60 years earlier, the matches were impossible. Not the compatibility of distant descendants, but genetic markers that suggested something science couldn't explain. The same soul in a different body leaves a trace in the genetic code. The discovery became a global headline. Skeptics tried to discredit it, but the more they tested, the more the evidence accumulated. Richard Sterling was, in every measurable way, the reincarnation of Edward of Eldoria, and Emily, whose DNA was also preserved in medical samples, was Isabella. Universities created entire departments dedicated to studying the phenomenon. Ancient religions smiled, saying they'd always known. And millions of people around the world who'd spent their lives feeling like they knew someone they'd just met, finally had validation. Soulmates weren't a romantic metaphor. They were a science that humanity was only beginning to understand. But the most beautiful story of this discovery didn't happen in a laboratory. It happened in a small village in the Ecuadorian Andes, where a 96-year-old elder saw the news on the dusty television at the community center. She looked at the photos of Edward and Isabella, then of Richard and Emily, and she began to cry, because she recognized them, not from history or legend, from memory. Memory of being a servant in the castle of Eldoria, of witnessing the love of the king and queen, of holding Isabella's hand when she died of heartbreak 3 months after Edward, of swearing at that moment that if souls really did return, she would also return to witness it again. And she did return, not as a princess or noblewoman, but as a simple grandmother who lived an honest life in the mountains of Ecuador, the same grandmother who gave the royal ring to Emily as a child, because somewhere deep down she always knew, always remembered, always guarded it. Her name this time was Rosa, and when interviewers finally found her, guided by Emily's family who recognized the story, she had only one thing to say: "I didn't need DNA or statues to know it was real. I saw it. I saw love that breaks death. And if you've seen that once, you never forget it, not in 900 lives." Rosa passed away 3 weeks after the interview, in peace, saying that her mission was complete, that she had witnessed the love twice, and now she could rest, or maybe, she said with a last smile, return to witness it a 3rd time. The discovery of the secret chamber changed everything. Tourism to the ruins of Eldoria increased 1,000%. Couples from all over the world made pilgrimages to touch the statues, hoping to feel what Richard and Emily had felt. Some swore they did feel it: warmth, energy, recognition. And on a night of full moon, the guards reported strange lights in the old throne room, not fire or electricity, but a soft golden glow that seemed to come from the very stones. It was as if the castle remembered, as if such powerful love impregnated the very place where it existed. Scientists tried to explain it away: electrical phenomena, reflections of minerals. But the romantics knew better. It was Edward and Isabella, Richard and Emily, Luna and Elena, all the versions of those souls, echoing through time, saying to the world, "We are real, love is real, and never ever give up on finding yours." 15 years after the discovery, in 2140, something even more remarkable happened. 2 children, one 7 years old from Tokyo and another 8 years old from Lagos, never having met, drew exactly the same images, images of the secret chamber, before it was discovered, before any photos existed. When the families connected through intrigued researchers and finally allowed the children to meet via video call, the moment was recorded. The 2 children looked at each other through the screen and simultaneously whispered the same word, in different languages, but with identical meaning: home. They weren't Edward and Isabella this time. Analyses suggested they were 2 of the royal guards who died protecting the castle, souls who witnessed the great love and swore eternal protection. And now they had returned, recognizing each other across continents, still fulfilling the oath made 900 years before. The story multiplied all over the world. People began to share experiences, meeting someone and feeling like they'd known each other for 1,000 years, touching and seeing places they'd never visited, dreaming of lives they'd never lived. But that felt more real than their current one, and a pattern emerged. Souls travel in groups. Edward and Isabella didn't reincarnate alone. They brought their court, their guards, their advisors, their friends, all returning, all meeting, all recognizing, creating a new version of the kingdom, not of territory, but of connection, a kingdom of souls that traverse time together. In 2150, the Eldoria Foundation, now run by the great-granddaughter of Sebastian Sterling, launched an ambitious project, a global database where people could register memories of past lives. Advanced AI looked for patterns, connecting people who shared complementary memories. Millions signed up, and connections began to happen. A woman in Australia who had always dreamed of being a medieval soldier found a man in Canada who dreamed of being the blacksmith of the same army. A teenager in Brazil who drew specific Viking ships found another in Norway who drew the same ones, but from a different angle, as if they had been on opposite sides of the same battle. Skeptics still claimed coincidence, collective imagination, but the matches were statistically impossible. Details that no history book recorded, but that three people on different continents remembered identically. Dead languages that 6-year-old children spoke fluently, without ever having studied them. Humanity was waking up not just to the idea of reincarnation, but to a greater truth, that we are all ancient travelers, that these lives we live are just chapters in a very, very long book, and that the people we love, that we recognize instantly, that we feel connected to beyond explanation, are not accidents. They are journey companions that we choose again and again and again. Edward and Isabella were just the first documented pair, but now, with technology and open minds, thousands of pairs were being discovered, recognized, celebrated, and they all had something in common. When they met, when they touched, when they recognized each other. They didn't just feel romantic love, they felt purpose, as if they had a mission, something they started in a past life and returned to complete. For some it was art, composers who died before finishing a symphony, returning as different musicians to finally create it. For some it was justice, activists who fought against tyranny and were killed, returning to continue the fight in a new form. For some, it was simply love. Couples separated by war, disease, tragedy, returning to finally have the time that was stolen from them. And Edward and Isabella, Richard and Emily, Luna and Elena, all those intertwined souls became a symbol, not just of romance, but of perseverance, of a promise kept against all odds, of a love that literally conquers death. In 2175, on the 950th anniversary of the first reign of Edward and Isabella, the United Nations declared the ruins of Eldoria as a World Heritage Site of the Soul. The first place recognized not for historical significance, but for spiritual significance, a place where love proved to be stronger than time. And at the ceremony, broadcast globally, something happened that no technology captured, but everyone present felt. A presence, not ghosts, not a haunting, but a palpable sense of approval, of joy, of two souls, and then 4, and then 6, and dozens, and hundreds. All those who were part of the original story and all their reincarnations, present in spirit. Thank you. The voice was not heard but felt, for not forgetting, for believing, for keeping the promise alive. Now you know, love does not end, and we are eternal proof. If you've made it to this point, if you've read these tens of thousands of characters about love that crosses centuries, you are part of this story too, because sharing is witnessing, and witnessing is keeping it alive. Leave your like now, not as an empty gesture, but as a declaration. I believe, I recognize, I know that love like this exists, because I feel it in my soul. Share it with someone who needs to know that the love they feel for someone, even against all logic, might be real, might be a memory of 1,000 years awakening, might be a soul recognizing its journey partner. Subscribe, because this isn't the last story, it's just the most documented. There are thousands waiting, thousands of souls who have returned, met each other, and proved that miracles happen every day. And give us super thanks, not for me, but for the concept itself, for the universe that allows love like this. for the fabric of reality that holds soul memories and allows them to return. That is sacred and deserves recognition. Edward and Isabella reigned in 1225 and died too young. Richard and Emily reunited in 2025 and lived fully. Luna and Elena chose love over convention in 2050. And now, as you read this, in whatever year it may be, two new souls are meeting, looking into each other's eyes and knowing. Maybe they're Edward and Isabella again, in a new form. Maybe they're other souls from the ancient kingdom, or maybe they're completely new, inspired by the story, making their own promise of eternal love. It doesn't matter, because what Edward and Isabella began wasn't about them. It was about proving what's possible, and they did. Against science, against logic, against death, they proved it. Love, eternal, real, unbreakable. And if you feel an emptiness in your soul, as if you're searching for someone you haven't met yet, don't give up. They're looking for you, too. And when you meet, you'll know. Not with your mind, with your soul. The same part of you that recognizes the truth of this story. Thank you for this journey. For believing when it was easier to doubt, for feeling when it was safer not to, for carrying this story in your heart and sharing it with others, wherever Edward and Isabella are now, in whatever form, in whatever world. They thank you too, for keeping the promise alive, for being a witness to eternal love, until the next story, until the next recognition, until forever, because souls like these, stories like this, never really end. They just await the next chapter, the next life, the next love. And you, reading this now, are part of the current chapter, part of the living story, part of the continuing miracle, with all the love that 950 years can hold, that 1,000 lifetimes can witness, that millions of souls can recognize. This is the eternal truth. True love never dies, never fails, never gives up. It just continues and continues and continues forever. And now, the final part of this extraordinary journey, the part that may be more important than everything that came before, because this isn't just the story of Edward and Isabella, or Richard and Emily, or Luna and Eleanor. It's a story about you who has read this far, you who felt something resonate as each word passed, you who maybe started skeptical but are now questioning, or you who always knew deep in your soul that love like this exists and have finally found validation. There's a reason this story touched you. It's not an accident. Nothing is ever an accident when it comes to souls. Maybe you're one of the reincarnated souls from Eldoria. Maybe you served in the castle, guarded the gates, cooked in the royal kitchens, fought in the battles, and something in this story awakened a dormant memory. Not a clear memory, not yet, but a feeling, a recognition. Or maybe you have no connection with Eldoria specifically, but you have your own story, your own soulmate waiting, or already found, or lost and searching again. And this story reflected your truth. Or maybe you're alone right now, questioning if true love exists, if it's worth continuing to believe, if waiting for a real connection makes sense, or if you should just accept the ordinary. And this story is your answer. Yes, it's worth it. Yes, it exists. Yes, keep believing. Because here's the truth that Edward and Isabella, through all their lives, have proven. True love isn't about luck. It's about recognition. And you can't recognize something you don't know. So if you feel empty, if you feel like you're searching, if you feel like someone's missing, that's not loneliness. It's memory. Soul memory of who you've loved before and who you'll love again. The touch that Richard and Emily shared, that explosion of vision and recognition, isn't exclusive to them. It happens every day, but most people ignore it, call it déjà vu, imagination, coincidence, and then let it pass. Don't let it pass. When you meet someone and feel like you already know them, pay attention. When you look into someone's eyes and feel an inexplicable recognition, don't dismiss it. When you touch someone and feel electricity that goes beyond physical attraction, investigate. Because those are your visions, your version of the touch, your soul's recognition. And yes, it will be scary. It was scary for Emily. She almost ran, almost let the fear of the impossible win over the truth of her heart, but she didn't run. And look what she gained, not just a life of love, but validation of 1,000 years of existence. So here's your challenge, person who has read this entire story, your mission, if you choose to accept it. Live as if souls are real, as if love transcends lives, as if every person you meet could be someone you've known before. That doesn't mean throw yourself into every relationship. It means be open, be aware, be willing to recognize when the real thing appears, even if it's inconvenient, improbable, or impossible according to logic, because Edward and Isabella were impossible. King and Queen in 1225 who died young, Richard and Emily, were impossible. A billionaire and an undocumented immigrant, Luna and Elena, were impossible. Two women in a world still learning acceptance, but they all chose love above impossibility, and they all won. You can win too. Your love may not look like theirs. It might be quieter, simpler, without dramatic visions or archaeological discoveries, but it will be equally real, equally profound, equally eternal. And when you find it, and you will find it if you haven't already, remember this story. Remember that true love doesn't give up, that souls will wait 800 years if necessary, that promises made transcend death. And then fight. Fight against fear, against doubt, against the voices that say it's impossible. Because Edward fought against invading armies, Richard fought against an entire society and family, Luna fought against expectations and prejudice, and they all won because love was stronger. Your love is stronger too. You just need to believe now. If you've really taken this story to heart, if you felt truth in it, there are practical things you can do. First, document your recurring dreams about places you've never visited, people you've never met. These might be memories. Second, pay attention to recognition. If you meet someone and feel an instant connection, explore cautiously. Third, visit places that call to you without logical reason. It might be where you lived before. Fourth, be patient. Edward waited 800 years. You can wait years or decades. Compared to eternity, that's nothing. And fifth, live fully. Emily worked, fought, built a life. When Richard appeared, she had something to offer. Be a complete person. And then when your soulmate appears, you'll create something greater than the sum of your parts. This story began with a touch. Emily serving dinner, her hand brushing against Richard's. A vision exploding, simple, accidental, destiny. From now on, pay attention to every touch, every glance, every inexplicable connection, because the next one might be the one that changes everything. And if you've already found your person, if you're reading this with them beside you or thinking of them, or separated but still loving, know this: you are as real as Edward and Isabella. Your story is just as valid. Your love is just as eternal. It doesn't matter if you remember past lives or not. It doesn't matter if you have dramatic visions or just a quiet sense of belonging. What really matters is that you have recognized each other, and that is the proof. Hold them close. Choose them daily. Fight for them when necessary. And know that what you have transcends this life. You will find each other again, and again, and again, forever. This is the promise. The promise that Edward made to Isabella when he died in her arms. The promise that Richard renewed when he found Emily. The promise that Luna and Elena confirmed. And the promise that is available to you. Eternal love isn't a privilege of kings or billionaires. It's the birthright of every soul. And you have a soul, Therefore, you have the right. Claim it. Believe when everyone tells you to be realistic. Feel when everyone tells you to be logical. Love when everyone tells you to be cautious. Because in the end, when this life is over and you look back, you won't regret having loved too much. You'll regret not having loved enough. Regret letting fear win. Regret choosing safety over soul. Edward died young, but he died loving. And because of that, he came back. He continued. He conquered death. You can conquer too. Not necessarily physical death, not yet, but the death of dreams, the death of hope, the death of belief in magic. This story, it's about resurrection, of love, of faith, of possibility, and you are part of it now, because you read, because you felt, because you are here in this exact moment. So go, live like the soul you are, love like the eternity you have, and recognize others who do the same. Build your own Eldoria, not of stone, but of moments, of touches, of recognitions, of promises that transcend time. And when you die, in this life or the next, and you look back on the journey, you will see a golden thread connecting all the lives, all the people you loved, all the moments that mattered, and you will know, not believe, not hope, but know. That love is the only thing that's real, the only thing that lasts, the only thing that matters. Edward and Isabella know. Richard and Emily know. Luna and Eleanor know. And now, you know too. Thank you for this journey. Through 1,000 years of love, for every word read, for every feeling felt, for every moment you chose to continue, instead of stopping. You are a witness now, a bearer of this truth, and when you share it, when you spread it, when you live this message, you become part of the eternal story. Welcome to the kingdom of Eldoria, not as a visitor, but as a citizen, as a soul that recognizes other souls, as love that knows that love never dies. Your 1,000-life journey continues, and wherever you go, whoever you become, you will carry this truth, this promise, this love, forever and ever, without end, because true love has no end, only infinite continuations, and you have just begun the next one.